Welcome back to another week in my life, I guess. This week's gonna be a bit of a busy one because there's a lot going on. I do have a lot of reading and book things to talk about, but there's also a lot of other stuff I'm gonna be doing this week. I did finish a book today, which is very exciting because it's Addie LaRue. I finally finished that monster of a book and I have so many thoughts. I'm also reading a whole host of other books and I have so many good updates on my other reads right now, but my grandma is actually also moving this week, so today's actually Tuesday. Yesterday, Monday, I was at her new place helping her move some stuff, and that's actually what I'll be mostly doing tomorrow with my day, is helping her move the rest of her stuff in and get settled. I'm also so thrilled and so grateful that I've been able to see my grandma basically every single day for the past few months because she's actually been living with my family just while she was waiting for her new place to become available and ready for her to move in. So it's just been so nice because for most of the pandemic we had just been, of course, distancing and not really able to see each other, but then when she moved in with my family, it's been so nice being able to see her and just be close to the people you love. Like, if you have friends and family that you haven't even hugged for months and months and months, it is so difficult. So I'm just so incredibly thankful. So I went to the grocery store this morning, got some groceries, also picked out some flowers for her to have tomorrow as kind of a little housewarming plant gift. I was also so happy this morning when I woke up, looked out my window and just looked into like a snow globe, into a snowstorm, into a blizzard, because all day it has been snowing. Winter is finally back, and I'm just gonna take it as a sign to put up the Christmas tree and a little bit of my decorations today, I think, if I manage to have time, because I really want to do it. I'm so happy that it is snowing so much. It's been so cozy. Also because I've been able to see my grandma so much, she started to teach me how to knit. I'm like awful at it, but I'm trying, and I just started, and that's okay. So most of this piece right here I can attribute to her. I've only think maybe done a couple rows. It's just been really fun. If you can hear my laptop dying in the background, it's because I'm currently uploading tomorrow's video, Wednesday's video, so yeah. But let me get my books and then let's talk about Addie LaRue. I also got some new fuzzy pink slippers, which I'm very excited about. They're so cozy, and they remind me of like my old ballet shoes, which is a bonus. Yeah, they just remind me of like my old point shoes, or not really my old slippers, but they're just very cozy. So all right, I kind of got my bangs to behave. I've got my stack, actually no, I don't have my stack of books. I've got my stack of books. All right, so I ended up giving Addie LaRue at the end 3.75 stars. I think in my mind that's like the cemented rating. I think that's the good way to go for me personally. I really wanted to give it 4 stars and to very simply break down Addie LaRue, which, if you don't know, the full title, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So many people are reading it right now because it was released October or something, I think. But it follows a girl named Adeline living in France in the 1700s, and on the eve of her wedding she makes a deal with kind of this devil, monster, god, evil, darkness man to become immortal, but she's also cursed in the fact that no one will remember her, she can't say her name, and just she will always be doomed to be forgotten by humanity and by anyone she meets. That changes when one day in 2014 she walks into a bookstore in New York and this boy named Henry remembers her. Like I said, very simply, to break down my personal likes and dislikes with this book, I would have given it the full 4 stars if it hadn't been for the writing. I was really not a fan of the writing for a whole bunch of reasons, but it just didn't click with me. It wasn't the prose for me. The whole writing style of the book was just not for me, and I know in my mind there are a number and a variety and a host of good reasons and logical reasons why V.E. Schwab might have chosen to write Addie LaRue the way she actually wrote it, because if you read it, you know that a lot of the sentences and the way that they are formed, the words that they use and the ways that they are patternized, they repeat themselves, they fall over themselves, and it's almost every other sentence of description or of plot, or even sometimes of dialogue and speech, the way that the sentences are formed, it's the same exact formula for each sentence. It was kind of like musical triplets in prose form, if that makes sense, I think. And then what would comprise the 3 notes of the triplet would be different ways of saying the same thing. Also in this book, I read it actually as part of this little book club that we recently formed, me and my friends from home. And we each started out this book trying to count the number of similes that was used, and by about, I quit when I got to 50, and that was at 3% through the book. V.E. Schwab had used 50 similes, and it was just crazy. I think if you've read this book, you know the number of metaphors and similes that were used. Once again, I think I know why she's using that many and why she's using them in the way that she's using them. It is a very metaphorical book. I just think for an almost 500-page book, this writing started to kind of nauseate me. It just made picking the book back up at times very difficult. It made me almost not want to do it at times, and I will say so much more about the writing in my wrap up, don't worry, but those are just my mini thoughts right now. The writing was the main thing that took away from the full 4 stars, but to say really good things about it, I loved the concept. The ideas that were in The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I gotta say, that's what like made this book good. Also, the way in which this story was created and told, if you've read it, you know I think exactly what I'm talking about. The things and ideas and the way that stories are used in this story was just so beautiful and so incredible. I love the commentary that goes on behind every single art piece, no matter what medium it might manifest itself in. It was just, I think, really brilliant, the commentary that was done there. As well, I really loved the storyline and the plot between Addie and the darkness who curses her, who eventually takes on the name Luke. I just thought it was a really compelling storyline. However, there is kind of a second point of view that you get for a little bit, and a lot of the story does take place in New York in 2014. For me, the parts in New York take so long to happen, and I really could have done with so much less of the New York scene. I just found those chapters and those pages and those parts so hard to get through, and I was just always waiting for the story to kind of switch back to Addie and to get back to her past life and like seeing her live through history. That was my favorite part. However, I also think on that note there were a lot of missed opportunities, because you're following a girl who has lived for 300 years through human history, and I just think there was so much you could have done there. The really main kind of core crux idea that for me I just loved so much was that it just really made you think about how each piece of art is formed, how every single thing that you look at that one individual creates isn't actually ever created by a single individual. Every piece of art you look at, whether it's a book cover or a painting or the design of a rug, is actually touched on and influenced by literally every single person and every single thing that one individual who has made it and who has their name attached to it has gone through, and all the people that they've met and all their life experiences are added up into this thing, whether they realize it or not, kind of subconsciously or consciously. I just think that was such a beautiful idea, and I love the way that it wound itself through The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I was just like in love with that concept. If nothing else, that idea is worth reading this book for. You can get through the writing and just kind of read the book, because it is a really long book and you feel like it's a long book, or at least I did. But that idea, I just gotta say, it was well done. Anyway, let's move on. 3.75 stars. Really excited to have read it. I think only one of my friends from home so far has finished it, and she really liked it as well, although we basically just share the same thoughts on it. I've rambled on for long enough about Addie. Let me tell you a few updates about The Dark Interval by Rilke. I am now 54 pages through. Once again, there's been so many beautiful quotes. I just really don't want this to end. I really don't want it to end. My favorite quote that I've come across since I've last spoken to you, there's clearly been a few, but this one, just last night I was reading it and it just hit me so hard. So he's talking about human loss mostly, or what it's like to lose a person that you love, but also this is just applied and can be applied to literally everything awful or any loss. He says, "Get to the bottom of this intensity and have faith in what is most horrible." Just that one tiny little bracket just really gave me so much that I needed. It is just the most beautiful thought, but also I think one of the most difficult thoughts to have faith in what is most horrible, just to have faith in the worst things and the most unbearable things and what is most difficult. And then, sorry, it goes on to the point of that. Have faith in what is most horrible instead of fighting it off. It reveals itself for those who can trust it, in spite of its overwhelming and dire appearance, as a kind of initiation, by way of loss, by way of such vast and immeasurable experience of loss, we are quite powerfully introduced into the whole. Death is only a relentless way of making us familiar and even intimate with the side of our existence that is turned away from us. Wow. Anyway, so that is that. Bluettes, I really don't know what to make of this yet, honestly. I made it to, I think, 34 pages through this now. I haven't really found that much more that I've been like, wow, that is incredible. I do love the ideas that she's talking about and what she's talking about when she's talking about color, but the way in which she is putting it down from her pen, I just don't think I'm super in love with that way yet. Once again, that probably will change though, because I have a lot more to go, so we will see. I'm also still reading Turn of the Screw this week. However, I'm so close to finishing it because for the past few days I got to a lot of parts that just made me want to keep reading so badly and find out what was happening. And maybe if you're reading it as well right now, you have gotten to those parts and you're like, okay, I need to get to the end of this book now, find out what happens, because that's how I've been feeling. I've been listening to it so much, like I can't stop, and I've just been absolutely like, this is the way you flip it. Annotating so much of it and like highlighting so much. And like I said last time, you could just spend forever within these pages. This has been a really long clip, so I think what I'm gonna go do right now is go make a cup of tea, and then I want to read a little bit more of Rilke, I think, right now, and then I want to be back to talk about Turn of the Screw more in depth, because there's so many little things that you could spend like infinities upon infinities talking about them, but there's just a few that I found so unsettling, so creepy, and then I'm also listening to a couple of audiobooks, so. Alright, so I'm back to talk about Turn of the Screw for a few little mini details and things that I find super interesting. So with our main character, the governess, there's been such a subtle, slow shifting change that's been going on the whole time you're reading it. It's so subtle that like the little moments you don't really seem to notice it until maybe like literally one sentence is said or one event occurs and you're like, wait, like when did the build up for this happen? But then you realize that it's been there all along, these slow kind of dark undercurrents going under the book, changing things very slowly. One of those things that change is the governess's perspective and her stance and her opinion on the character of Miles and Flora, the two little children that she's looking after. The book begins with her thinking they can do no wrong, that they are the most perfect creations on God's green earth, that they're just the most heavenly little things in the whole universe. However, more recently, she starts to really get so paranoid. And like the paranoia I want to talk about in specific things does connect to the way that she views the children, but as well they are separate things within themselves, I think. But just to speak on her paranoia for a little second, there's been so many parts that I've underlined where she is so certain of a thing, either that someone is saying or someone is doing, and she's writing down her memoir of her time at Bly Manor, and she's telling us these things, but she's so certain that someone has said this or that someone has done a thing, when in reality there's no proof of this fact. There's no proof anywhere that these words were actually said, and a lot of the time her mentality and her way of thinking is just so utterly wrong in its illogicity and stuff like that, and it is so frightening to see her attribute these things said or to attribute these actions or to be so sure of the fact that someone is withholding information from her or that someone has given her information when they actually haven't. One of the first ones I noticed is that she's in Flora's room with her and the candle goes out and it just says, "I felt an instant certainty that Flora had extinguished it." When is that true? Like, we just don't know. We're not there in the scene, we can't see the scene. The scene is only lighted and more oftentimes, I guess, darkened by the things which she chooses to tell us, which makes this book like so interesting. I think it does it so expertly. And one of the biggest pieces in that is that the main thing of this book, of The Turn of the Screw, is that the governess is convinced that the children are seeing ghosts. That's what this whole book is about, and she sees them too. And she is so convinced that the children are seeing these things, even though they've not told her anything. She just perceives this by the way that they look or their silences. She takes these silences, these not words, as way of proof that they are actually seeing things. And it's this whole kind of will they, won't they tell each other what they're seeing with their own eyes. She tries to force it out of them in certain ways without ever alluding to the fact that she herself is seeing the ghosts. And every single scene where she's talking to the children in which this is known, which she thinks she's trying to pull out of them, it's like pulling teeth, but it's so tense, it's so fraught, and literally any single word or letting on her part that she's seeing the ghosts and that she knows that they know that she knows that they know. It's just like she's playing 4D chess, but like she might be the only player because no one else is really even on her level, I don't think. And of course, she's afraid to introduce the idea of ghosts and the supernatural to the children first. She's the one who's afraid to break that silence and to ask them if they're seeing what she's seeing, because it says she defers to the old tradition of the criminality of those caretakers of the young who minister to superstitions and fears. Another sentence that just really just enforces this point is that she's talking to Mrs. Groves and she says, "It all lies in half a dozen words, words that really settle the matter. Think, you know, what I might do, what he might do. I felt that if there were nothing else to make it sure, it would be made so by the systematic silence of each." So she's just so sure that these things are happening when there's no proof. Alright, hi guys. So it is Wednesday now, and I'm currently at my grandma's place, about to move a whole bunch of stuff. Also, I did not manage to finish Turn of the Screw last night. I literally have like 7 pages left, which is so sad. I'm gonna finish it today because so much is happening and I just want to know what's going on. So, gonna do that today. It's Thursday and I am exhausted from yesterday. I've kind of just been a blanket monster. Yeah, a monster all day. But I'm really glad that my grandma is kind of getting settled in to her apartment now, and yeah, I have some really exciting reading updates though, because I finished 2 books last night because I keep saying that I just wanted to finish Turn of the Screw, and last night I was like, I'm listening to the end of this audiobook if it kills me, and it almost did. Turn of the Screw is one of my new favorite books of all time. I gave it 5 stars. It was like a piece of genius. There's so much I want to say, and I've actually, like, as soon as I finished it last night, I annotated a lot more of it, and then I started writing down this plan to make a whole video about Turn of the Screw, kind of like an analysis, a review, and just a discussion about the book, because it is so full of things to discuss. Like, it's actually insane. I know I said, I think on Tuesday, that I was gonna come back and just talk more and more about this, but like, I do want to save some things for the video. If you guys want to see a whole video on Turn the Screw, let me know, but I'm really excited and just so ready to make a whole sit-down video solely about this book because it blew me away. I think it was amazing. I don't want to spoil anything here either, and of course we'll be talking a lot about it in our November live show on the 28th on Kira's channel over at Kira Foster. But wow, the writing definitely took a little bit of time to get used to and to fall into, but once I did, I just like got carried away. And then I don't know if you've read this, you kind of get to the end of the book and then you completely by that point have forgotten that the prologue exists. It's not really a prologue, like that's how the story starts, but the prologue to the main story, like the boxed in narrative, exists. And then it's kind of a book that once you finish it, it's very circular and invites you to go back to the beginning and consider the questions that were asked in the beginning few chapters, because I had completely wiped them from my memory by the time you fall into the actual story of the governess at Bly Manor, which was just so brilliant, and like every single little thing that James Henry, I'm so tired, that Henry James puts in here for you to analyze and to pick out yourself. I was talking to Lucy about it, and she really expertly called it a very interactive experience, a very interactive book, because like when there is ambiguity in novels, and this whole book is just one ambiguous tale, but when there is ambiguity, the part of the ambiguity and the way that you decide which way it flips, or maybe there's multiple ways that the question you're trying to ask of the book could flip, it says something about you, like the way you interpret it, what your theory is about the book. I think that's another reason why Turn of the Screw is just so brilliant, but I have so many little points to say. I actually started to tab in red because it kept coming up way too often for me not to keep track of it, but the governess constantly brings up in her own mind allusions to fairy tales and myths and stories. Not only when she's playing with the children, there's a scene where they dress up as Romans or characters from Shakespeare's plays, and they're just playing at make-believe, but it starts to invade a lot more of her writing. And there is like a fairy tale aspect in and of itself in the book, in that the governess is like under the charm of the children, so I used red for that as well. But then outside of just that theme kind of being invisible to the characters, like the theme just there in the book, that started also to like literally trickle out of her writing, because she constantly says, I am under a charm, or these things that are happening seem to be things out of a storybook or a fairy tale. I think if I was doing another reread, I would mark it differently, but it was similar enough that I just marked it in red as well. She constantly compares Bly and her story and the children to this performance on stage, because for example in this one she says, I felt the importance of giving the last jerk to the curtain, which is interesting. This one's a really nice quote, but it contains the same thing within it, because she says, the summer had turned, there it is again, the summer had gone, the autumn had dropped upon Bly and had blown out half our lights. The place, with its gray sky and withered garlands, its bared spaces and scattered dead leaves, was like a theater after the performance, all strewn with crumpled playbills. So, and if you've gotten to the end of this book, and of course there's the question about reality and what's actually happening within the story, like are the ghosts in the story ghosts? Kind of thing. I would take probably every red tab as my answer to that question. I really don't want to spoil anything, but I think a lot of people know the ending of Turn of the Screw and like the central question that the novel asks. So I'm not sure, but that would be my answer, I guess. And then the last one, just the whole curtain call and the theater and the performative aspect again. With the word he spoke, the curtain rose on the last act of my dreadful drama, and the catastrophe was precipitated. So there's just so many allusions to fiction. There's too many allusions to fiction within her fiction for me to believe that it's non-fiction, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I just think it was brilliant. Like I said, I have so many more thoughts, but 5 stars. So impressed, so blown away. And just the Gothic. I just love the Gothic so much. This and Phantom of the Opera and the Castle of Otranto. I've just been able to read so many more Gothic novels this year, which is amazing, because I think academically when I get back to school, like it is a topic I want to explore so much more deeply. I know there's so much done about the Gothic already, but I would just love to really get more deeply into it. So that is that. I also finished A Little Princess last night. I don't think I even mentioned I was reading it, but I just fell so in love with it, and like I was listening to it really slowly and I just really fell into it and fell so in love with it. If you don't know, A Little Princess is a classic. I think it was written in 1905 by Frances Frances Burnett, and I think I've read it before because I believe in grade 4 my elementary school teacher read the whole book to us out loud during our reading times over a period of a couple months, I think, and then we got to watch the movie. But I haven't seen the movie since the 4th grade when I was 9, and I would love to watch it again sometime in the future because I loved A Little Princess. We're following Sarah Crew, who is uber rich. Her father, Captain Crew, has to go back to India where he is working in the diamond mines, yes, and he leaves her at Miss Minchin's seminary for girls at like a school. And so she's very rich. She's kind of the star pupil because the school is using her as their like poster child to encourage other parents to send their children to Miss Minchin's abode. Miss Minchin is not a very nice lady. Really tragically though, Sarah's father dies and loses his entire fortune. So Sarah is left with nothing, and then everyone's attitudes, her classmates and her teachers and Miss Minchin, their attitudes all change drastically towards her. She is swept up to the upstairs bedroom in the attic, and she is now basically a scullery maid for the school. She has to run chores for the cook. She has to teach the little children, even though she is still expected to keep up her own lessons and teachings for herself. And it's just a really, really sad story in that way. But the power of imagination and the power of stories in A Little Princess was just so inspiring, so beautiful, and it was a really extremely cozy book as well, as sad as it was. I just loved it. I loved listening to it in the evenings, curling up in my reading chair with like a mug of eggnog and listening to it. I really loved it. I give it, I think, 4.5 stars. Honestly, I would really recommend. It was beautiful. I'm still reading Rilke. I am now, I think, almost 62 pages through. I am adoring it. Yeah. That is my only update for right now on this, I think. I'm still reading Bluets. I'm going to focus my reading today on Bluets, I think, when I do read physically, which I will have a few more pages of it to read. Today, did I start it today or last night? Last night, I also started House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig. I don't know if it's a YA. I don't know if it is. I'm gonna check. But House of Salt and Sorrows is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, the fairy tale, and it's a fantasy, like, it's very dark, spooky, and I'm also loving the fact that basically all of the sisters are named after women from the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe, because we have like Lenore and Marilla and stuff like that, so it's just really, really fun. But I'm not sure, I don't have that many thoughts on it yet, but I am very intrigued because I do love Entwined by Heather Dixon, which is my favorite retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. So I also played myself because I set up the Christmas tree a couple nights ago, but then I realized that I stole all the Christmas tree lights last year for my bookshelf, and now I have no lights for the Christmas tree. So gonna have to get some of those. All right, so I just am using up my last packet of this blueberry tea by Celestial that I really, really loved. I'm so sad I'm out of it, but I thought tonight I would try combining it with the eggnog that I got and just see how it tastes. I usually don't add anything to tea, but I was feeling very much like some blueberry nog. So that's what we're gonna try. All right, it is an extremely lovely color that it's turned. It's like very pale lavender, but we're gonna try. Oh my gosh, that is so good. That is so good. Honestly, I was expecting it to be really awful, I'm not gonna lie, but that is so good. I was not expecting that. It's so lovely textured as well because the eggnog is kind of thicker, and then the blueberry is just, it's so good. Blueberry eggnog, oh my gosh. Something I've been trying to do when it gets darker now at like 5, instead of just being so mopey about it, is to put my pajamas on, yep, and then get very cozy with like a special warm drink, light a candle, curl up with an audiobook or a few pages of a book and just like really enjoy it and feel like I'm having some magical wintry sleepover rather than just being really upset that it's dark out. I would love to as well when it gets dark out, maybe instead of feeling like it's time for bed, try baking at night, trying to do some Christmas cookies or Christmas cakes or something, because I think that would be fun, and then it would just make the apartment smell so delicious. Anyway, I'm gonna go enjoy this. I'm gonna go listen to more of House of Salt. Yeah, House of Salt and Sorrows, because I'm honestly getting really into it. I'm loving the description of like the dresses and the gowns and the shoes, because the shoes are a big part of the 12 Dancing Princesses and everything that's going on so far. So I'm really hoping it's good. I don't think the writing is quite so strong character-wise yet, at least. It's a very windy night, but it is getting a little bit creepier, so that's what I'm gonna do. All right, it is now Friday evening, so I just thought I would pop on and close off this week's vlog. It's been a pretty busy week. I found a new favorite book, The Turn of the Screw. Like I said, I did start to plan a little bit of the video about it, and I know as soon as possible I need to call Lucy because I know she finished the book as well. It was a reread for her, but we're just gonna talk so much about it because wow. It was just, I was blown away by how brilliant it was. I know I keep saying that, but it was amazing. Final update on House of Salt and Sorrows for this week. I'm actually quite liking the imagery and the very specific kind of sea and ocean and water creepiness, because there's a lot to do with the supernatural, as well as like it's just a very cool environment that Aaron A. Craig has created, because they live at Highmore, which is like this castle that overlooks the sea, and there's rocks and there's grottos and there's caves and there's octopi, and it's just really interesting in that way. And I love the imagery that like I've got going on in my mind about it, because it's a very cool place to inhabit. Another thing that's making it just really cozy is the constant allusion to different kinds of food and like gowns and fireplaces and getting cozy and going to balls, and it's just like my favorite things about fantasy that make it such a comforting genre for me. I filmed a very exciting video today that took a long time to film because I just wouldn't shut up about the topic, but I'm really excited to finally have that video out. It's not my bookshelf tour, which is gonna go up I think the next video after this one, but yeah, we'll see you very soon in my next video. Sending you all a very big hug, and yeah, okay, ciao.